Ora, muito boa tarde a todos, bem-vindos e bem-vindas. O meu nome é Carlos Sezões, sou Managing Partner da DERFI Leadership and Change Builders. Vamos então dar início à nossa segunda Web Talk da DERFI, a segunda desde cerca de 5 meses de historial da nossa organização, como sabem, intitulada esta Web Talk Talent Strategy for the Future of Work. Como o painel não português e também julgou alguns inscritos, vou passar para inglês, uma língua franca que eu quero crer que estamos todos mais à vontade, quer no painel, quer também na audiência. So, good afternoon everyone. Let's start our web talk. Welcome once again. I would like to start welcoming, of course, and thanking our speakers on behalf of the DERFI team. And in 3-4 minutes, no more than that, we've here some introduction notes for this event. My first big thank you goes, of course, for the 4 fantastic guests that will be with us in this late afternoon. Coming, as you can see, from different realities, different backgrounds. They bring their personal views on these increasingly dynamic dimensions of corporate talent management in these challenging times. So thank you. Starting, Andrea Rangel, thank you very much. Currently head of people at Deloitte Portugal, having performed in the past different HR roles at Cisco, and if I can recall, also in the consulting services. Thank you, Andrea. Welcome, Ben Griffin. Ben is a HR tech entrepreneur, founder of companies like Talento. He's currently bringing his HR tech expertise to the market through Accelerate HR. I hope I pronounced it well, Ben. And he's in the middle of launching an assessment marketplace called Easy.market. Thank you once again, Ben. Joining us from Lyon, France, Carlos Fontelas Carvalho. Welcome, my friends. Carlos is president of ADP France and Switzerland. As you may be aware, an American multinational provider of human resources management software and services. He previously performed also multinational top management roles at Davis Group, both in Spain and in France. And finally, Clara Celestino. Clara, thank you very much for coming. Clara is country human resources manager at SEO Portugal, also with a long and successful career in well-known multinational companies like Microsoft and L'Oreal. So to all of you, we are grateful for your time and your generosity in this session of let's call it knowledge sharing. Secondly, of course, I would like to thank all of you in the audience for your interest, for being here, and for the fact of, I can imagine, intense personal and professional agendas you've made this afternoon available for this debate. So straight to the point, why are we debating talent strategies? I think we all agree that the world of work, if we can call it this way, the very essence of the organization and what it means to be an employer or a manager or a business leader are in a time of rapid change. What are enablers of this change? I would say essentially the ongoing digital revolution, the cultural pressure of the new generations, mostly millennials, and also this emerging Generation Z that brings new expectations and behaviors, and what I could call the consolidation of an era of exposure, of transparency for professionals and for organizations. We are in the age of Glassdoor, for example, which is unprecedented in human history. I think these spirals of change force each other, and I think the current pandemic was, of course, an accelerator, but I strongly believe that the roots of this change were already here, in fact. Therefore, corporate cultures, which, by the way, were the main topic of our first DERFI Web Talk 2 months ago, are being transformed in dimensions such as leadership, such as decision-making, how to face uncertainty, risk, change, and of course, how we work, how we lead, how we create, how we collaborate, innovate, and of course, how people are valued and empowered. Some new realities we all face, of course, one more than others, of course, the work models, no more aligned in time and space, which impacts job role autonomy, reporting rituals. Work is becoming more something you do, not just a place you go to. We work anytime, anywhere, in many job roles, and so self-leadership is now mandatory, and team spirit and engagement are issues to address in many organizations. Transparency and knowledge sharing are becoming mandatory cultural assets. Everybody wants now to enable collective intelligence and collaborative cultures. Leaders are really trying to be enablers. Leaders are trying to provide vision, context, challenge, and let people perform their work. I strongly believe that the era of command and control is really over. Adaptability and agility are becoming essentials in the culture's DNA. So we have to rethink also the current design of our structures. corporate careers are losing its meaning and its substance. They are shorter, they are non-linear tracks, and that's becoming the general rule. Talent is much more, modern careers is much more skill sets that provide us employability, and people want to use it, of course, for a purpose. Talent scarcity is in some key skills and job roles, it's also a reality. And finally, diversity will be the future of the workplace. Diversity not just in age, in gender and cultural origin, but also in work models. We are now managing people that work full-time, that work part-time, that work remote, that work in projects by freelancers and so on. So we must also address this scenario and the near future scenario of humans interacting with machines. So where can we find the solution to provide some kind of order, alignment in this chaotic change I just described to you? Could be, of course, in talent management processes, could be, for instance, in cultural transformation, could be, for instance, in new employee value propositions and new leadership models, could be, of course, in new organizational redesigns for more agile processes and swift deliverables, could be in, the answer could rely on technology, talent and HR tech for better matching and talent in corporations and better forecasts. Well, I don't expect us to address and find solutions for all these topics, of course, but I guess we can identify some, what I usually call tipping points, when it can enable and facilitate change. So in short, we are here to address and debate these future trends in this, I would call it, uncharted territory. We are learning step by step. Well, I won't take much more of your time. I will now hand over to Andrea to present us her views. Andrea, this digital floor is yours, and thank you all very much for coming. Please, Andrea.
Hi, Carlos. Well, thank you so much for having me today and to invite me. I have to tell that this is the first time that I'm at an online stage with the audience. So it's good to connect and have this conversation about future. And future, it is what we all are wondering, right? But then life happens, and then we have a pandemic. But it is interesting for us, especially now being here, and really looking into what, and this is a part of what I wanted to share with you today, is a little bit what we can see as a trends, right? And as leader of people in Deloitte, what I can see as what is my main, what is in my top of mind, and what I can look into the, while I can analyze what's going on, right? And we really want to try to navigate and implement all of what you just mentioned, right? And sharing some of my thoughts. I think it's, we all acknowledge that going forward, people will be at the core of our decisions, right? And one of my main thoughts is that digital will also humanize the enterprise. And truth is, many people, and you mentioned about it, right? This technological transformation. People don't believe that sometimes digital and humanize can be in the same sentence, but they can. And when we leverage digital correctly, and that's one of my main bets at Deloitte, we can create a more human experience when we see our people better. We understand the gaps, and we can definitely design solutions, right? And as an example, when we analyze as something simple as a people survey in our company, we can look at the data, we can take insightful information and take really proper decisions on it. So I think technology, so digitalizing, came to stay and will become much more a priority going forward. Technology will also create a more personal and connected experience while we are all living this hybrid way of working. And I think we will make it. We will connect teams. We're going to continue to be productive while integrating somehow the personal life. So the digital and the technology also allows you to work from anywhere. And then you can integrate yourself, what you value, which is different from one another, and bring your personal life into this new equation with the enablement of technology. So I think digital somehow will humanize the experience. The second thought would be we will design work for well-being. Well-being will be at the core. Again, people at the center. And there is a space where we need to call the employees, and they need to take ownership and in setting their own boundaries. They need to understand what well-being means for them. And again, this is what I mentioned yesterday in the foreign HR. One size fits one. What is for me well-being, maybe it's not for you. And each one of us needs to have this type of set of boundaries and understand, what can I do? How can I shape the way I work in order to fit my way and bring the best out of me while I'm working? Because in the future, everything is going to be integrated. There is no time for work or time for personal life. Everything is going to be together. So as a company, we do have much more responsibility in helping employees going through this journey, because it's change. And we also need to help leadership to look it in a different way. I don't think we have leadership prepared for that, but from a people perspective, we need to help them, right? On a third reflection, we need to focus on teams. And the concept of teams, it's because teams is where really the work happens. If we get teams right, we will win, because performance happens on teams. I can work in the same company, I can work in the same organization, and I can have a completely different experience from one of my peers, because I belong to a different team, which has different codes, which has different rituals, and we need to make it right. When we foster dynamic, successful teams, we want them to collaborate and perform, and being a place where each one knows exactly what is the role. We will all benefit from a company perspective if we work performance from a team perspective, when each individual know exactly what is their role. So this is quite important, to have the spirit within the team that we believe. So there is a values sharing within the team, where we feel that we are quite connected and bounded, and there is proximity. And again, as an employee, I want to be seen, developed, and recognized. And I'm seen in my team if I really know what is the value that I add within the purpose of that team, of that or that project. Last but not least, and one of, I think, the main points and the priority, I think empathy will be the superpower. Coming from the pandemic that we just lived, and each one of us dealt it in a different way, we need to have the progress and the empathy to see what happened to the person through their own eyes, and stop projecting what we would do, what we would think that would be the best. We need to really take out our shoes and walk with other person's shoes. Proximity, it's going to be a way of being, and we need to work in a culture that connection and empathy is at the core. Because when we truly connect with someone else's experience, then we grow. We find ways, we learn ways we never thought, right? Because it builds upon what we think. So personally, we grow, but also we create a bond of trust, because from that empathy comes vulnerability, and vulnerability is where trust lives, right? And if I want people to be connected and be authentic and be themselves, then I have, to have that stage and that openness that people can be open, and because they're going to feel that they're going to be heard. I think today trust in leadership is at table stakes, and building this culture needs to be from the top. So this is my main thoughts, what is on top of my mind when it comes to designing what is the experience of working of the future. which, by the way, it's already the present. I can see you're on mute. I don't know if it's only me that I'm not listening. Carlos, I can see your...
Já estou a ouvir?
Okay,
Agora sim,
now
tive
I
aqui
can
técnico
hear
comigo.
you. Now I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Great insights. Now, Ben, you are working in technology in the past few years. What are your insights? Can technology save or be part of the answer of all these questions that I left here in the beginning?
Oh, first of all, Carlos, thank you for the invitation. I'd like to thank Andrea for our nice and broad explanation. You took some parts away, but that's great. We're all thinking the same thing, so it's a small little place we are in. But I would like Carol said, I would like to fly this situation on from the technological point of view. Let's take a little step back. We're at a situation for the first time in 100 years, the entire global society, work society, private society, has gone to a crisis that was not man-made. At least that's what we know, and let's keep it that way. It is a crisis that is not man-made. And at this moment, we're now going through the first wave of reactions on that crisis. People are coming back out, they're going back to work. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm having my first real life talk in 2 days before an audience. So that's about 2 years ago. So a lot of us are re-experiencing things we had before, but a lot has changed. A lot has changed, and there are a lot of expectations created. I had a question very early in the beginning. Somebody told me this must be the ideal place for you. I mean, you're in assessments, so can you now assess how people were before the crisis and how people are going to deal with the crisis, how they will deal with staying home and this remote work? And my answer was, nobody chose to stay home and do remote work. We were basically forced to stay home and do remote work. I used to be a management consultant, and one of the things we used to say is change comes through the barrel of a gun. It's an explanation that was awarded to Mao. It's not really Mao, but this is more or less, or this was more or less, a gun put to our heads. We stay home and we change. But I think this is a huge opportunity. Technology has proven us with some hiccups that it can bring us solutions. I mean, when Andrea referred to Teams, I don't think she mentioned Teams by some IT company, but Teams by some IT company is a big solution. Zoom is a big solution. And all these technologies were growing and growing, trying to give us answers. They were expanding the possibilities. So we have that. We have learned to work in this virtual environment, and we know how to do that. But if we look around us, this great opportunity also gives us great responsibility. I like the fact that you mentioned that people can be authentic, that people can have their own place to work. But I think there is at this moment, a huge challenge for employers. To me, employers at this moment have the opportunity to embrace something I would like to call the total workforce. It's no longer about somebody working in an organization 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or working part-time home. No, it's also about freelancers. It's also about gig workers. It's also about project workers. It's also about people working together in groups remotely. Either they're going to be working in Portugal, or they can be working in Poland, or they can be working somewhere else. And we will not only see that with the big corporations that already are doing this for the past 5 to 10 years. No, we will see that with smaller companies also. So that is part number one. A second important part I see there is a word that everybody seems to be forgetting, but is on top of my agenda. I would like to call it transparency. When we talked about the moment of working together, to me that means let's then transparently share all this information organizations have about people. Let me quote from my background. I don't know a lot of companies who share the information in an assessment report with an applicant or an employee. There will be 10 to 15, maybe 20% that does that. But I can assure you it's not going to be more than 75%, 25% that transparently shares all the information. And if I jump immediately to the other side, just imagine what that means for tech companies. tech companies were not designed to open up HR tech information to all the stakeholders. Usually it goes through HR, it's channeled. What imagine if we now put all the information open and we truly are starting to think user-centric tools, where we really start to think employee experience, where the candidate, the participant, the employee really starts to see how things are working in the process. I'll give you a simple example. I was listening into a conversation this week, and I hear that huge hospital, huge, like something like 12,000 people, the applicants from the internal process are automatically all assessed. All the applicants who are internal employees are automatically assessed and get automatically all the information on the assessment, not the external candidates. Why do we have two processes? What I'm saying is this gives us an opportunity to completely rethink. So that's one thing. We have organizations rethinking. And to me, I'm giving a talk in 2 days on talent shortage. And one of the big things I spend a lot of time on reading, there's a lot of really interesting papers published. But the one thing I'm seeing there is that experience throughout the entire life cycle. By the way, everybody who has graphs about talent life cycles, just throw them away. They don't exist anymore. They will completely change. They're all linear. The talent life cycle is not going to be linear anymore. It's going to be chaotic. People will have plenty roles, and those talent life cycles, we will have to redesign them. If we redesign those, then we need to redesign the HR tech around it. So you can already see the first designs in HR tech beginning to change, and it will have to be built no longer around the company, but around the people. I like that when you mentioned that, Andre. I think people were central, but they will even become more central. I mean, the great walkout has nothing to do with work, but it has everything to do with people realizing I am me. And apparently our governments can make things happen if the need is big enough. So we learned that we can have our own identity, our own individualism. So we will see more of that in the workplace. And those organizations that understand and manage that, those tech companies that can tie into that, they will be the successful providers of the future. All the other ones will have to be running behind the new reality. So I think that is a major opportunity, but I'm not convinced that we have all, and that all providers and that all organizations have yet grasped it. I think we're still a bit in a waiting phase. If you look at the numbers on how many people we need to hire, I mean, I don't know if any of you read the publication by Korn Ferry, but they're quoting numbers in the billions of euros on quoting. I also read that publication. It's a nice paper written by Deloitte, by the way, also on those data. It's huge, interesting stuff. I just wonder, I think a lot of that material is based on information going back to pre-corona. We have no real clue what's going on. That was my finding when I'm starting to look for information on talent shortage. The best information is 2.5 months old. We have no history. We have no background on this. We don't know what's going to happen. There's one thing I know is that tech needs to change. The tech we have today is good, but it's not good enough. Very interesting study is HR tech ATSs are not built for diversity, are not built for inclusion. Second conclusion, and if anybody's interested, I'll send that paper to Carlos and he can share it. ATSs, the algorithm is made in such a way that the algorithm reconfirms what the recruiter is looking for and enhances what the recruiter wants to see. So therefore, he's getting more of the same. So he's getting more of the perfect CVs he likes. There is a lot of data hidden in your ATS that is not coming to surface. So I call this low-hanging fruit. Just some research on an ATS, finding out how the algorithm works and fine-tuning it would bring people to the surface that are potentially useful in the organization, but they're not being used today. My takeaway on this, huge opportunity. I am extremely excited and extremely worried for the same reason, because there's a lot of work to do and there's so little time. for the opportunities that are there. But to me, the most important part is that the old balance between employee is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. I'm afraid that our legislative power we have in Europe and in our national countries is running behind realities. I mean, labor contracts as we know it on a European level, on a local level, are not going to bring the solution we are looking for. It will have to be much more flexible. I mean, recently I heard a guy who is doing freelancing and is getting questions from the tax agency saying, yeah, but basically you're not a freelancer because you only have one client. Let's forget this kind of legislation. It doesn't work anymore. We need to adapt to the new situation. So interesting times, interesting new workforces, interesting insights. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Ben. Great insights about the next level of transparency that you mentioned us. Let's see if we can reach that next level, and what we have to do with the talent life cycle. Because I agree with you, linear paths or journeys are not anymore the pathways of the present or the future or the near future. So we have to adapt them. Thank you very much, Carlos. From your point of view, how you see this happening in the next few years?
Thank you for the opportunity, Carlos, and for the invitation. I hope that my sound goes correctly. And thank you for this opportunity to share some thoughts, maybe a different perspective. It's almost a cliche, but it's true. I agree with everything what was said, and my different perspective here in trying to add any value to this discussion is saying that this period of global crisis that we just experienced together has brought us a lot of new behaviors. A lot of things that we've been enormously changed, like Ben was just mentioning. Huge events in scale, but one thing is for sure, humanity has seen others and always got even better because we were able to adapt, to evolve, to change, to transform. That is my optimistic first post-it, because for sure we are going to be better than we were. And that it's food for thoughts. And a good energy, I would say, shot that we need to take. We are going to be better than we were. And I must say here, once again, trying to give any value, is that I feel privileged a person in the HR world, because at ADP, as an unique observer of, because of the position that we have on the corporate world, being on the human capital business, we have a particular perspective of the organization and the evolution of work, where data is key more than ever. And it's we already talked about this also. And the way we produce meaningful reporting to help HR leaders to decide and to be more effective is being more, I would say, asked. The need is there because people need to based in something to take decisions, and they need to be with less waste and be more effective. And in the last year and a half, the working transformations were not only, and let me add this different perspective, not only about working remotely. And we talk a lot about working remotely. And my perspective today, and in the next minutes here, it's that obviously we have seen many other changes than only, and I think we talk, I don't say too much, but we talk a lot about the working remotely. And we saw changes like management of the partial activity, sometimes complex remote hiring that people needed to handle, and let's see what's going to happen now. Many challenges around maintaining employee engagement, reflections on the nature of the workplaces, and even on the very nature of the work, on the meaning that must be given to avoid any demotivation. And I want to give you an example here, a data example. We need to think about that a large part of our European economy is based on employees, all generations included, that cannot work from home, that cannot work remotely. And it's about 7 out of 10. And these employees should in no way be forgotten on this transformation, on this evolution. But because if they cannot work from home, or more generically, they cannot work remotely, they need also to be more, they need more flexibility. They have a desire for more autonomy. They need to feel that companies trust them just as much as those that now saying, you know what, I'm going to work from home from now on. And we need to avoid, and this is vital to think, second post-it, to avoid to create new divisions, fractures, even to the privilege of some of our employees over the others. So how can we avoid this deep fracture, inequality between those of our colleagues that can work part of their time at home and those that we must be on site? How to avoid frustrations, tensions, but also loss of contact and sense of collective that makes a company big, that makes the company perform and allows us to move forward together, looking in the same direction. This is something that is happening right now. And I would say that my call to action here, or my deep thought, is that leaders' responsibility, it's big, or I'd say as ever, or more than ever, to identify how to federate, how to give meaning and respect from personal balance in order to create this corporate empathy, like Andrea was just mentioning, this value sharing between the corporate values and the personal values. And we are on it right now. Don't wait, and I hope that we have some of HR world here around the table, virtual table today. Don't wait to take decisions. Test, take risks, be bold as you can. People will follow you if you work with transparent communication. We are in the world that they are at this moment a huge awareness on diversity, on inclusion. This will attract lots of talent. And once again, like Ben was giving examples just before, and do it now, because this is the time to surf that wave, to put all on board, the ones that can work remotely and the ones that for the time being, we didn't invented yet a way of putting them working outside the site, a specific site that still is 70% of our world. This is my call to action, my added value today.
Thank you, Carlos. Fantastic. I underline here your message regarding fairness. I think it's important, not more divisions, not segmentations that make people feel that they are not appreciated or not taken with treated
Part of
with
this new evolution.
Of course, it is. It's very relevant. And I'll pass over to Clara. Clara has the advantage of being the West one. So, Clara, what are your insights about these topics?
Hello, good afternoon to all, and thank you so much for the invitation. So I was hearing my colleagues here, and I tend to agree to what was said. And my perspective on this is that when we are talking about all the change and the key role that human resources have on this, and also the leaders, I think about a lot of things. I think about the culture of the company, because we are thinking how people can have more flexibility, how people can do their work in a different way. But the culture that the company have needs to allow that, because it's not implementing a process and give that flexibility to the employees, and then the culture or the process that we have are not aligned. So it's like we do this transformation through people, but we need to have the right process in place. They need to be aligned with the culture that we want to have in the companies. Then also the technology, that I think it's an enabler and just simply an enabler. And the companies need that to work in a different way. We will have people on site, we will have people at home, and the companies will need to have the technology that will enable that, but also the facilities. So the way people worked before is going to be different in the future. So the offices, when you can see a lot of companies are changing the offices and the way things are organized. And then we also talked about analytics and data. And it's super important that we can have, as a companies, like workplace analytics, to understand the behaviors of our employees, how long they are connected, how, for example, we also talked here about the leadership and the importance of leadership. I don't know if you are aware, but through workplace analytics, not by person, but in a global way, companies can see the time or the way each leader connect with employees, if it's in a regular basis, and also they can correlate that with other things and see if, for example, if a leader have a greater connection with their team, and if they have regular one-on-ones, they might have a link on the productivity or internal surveys, whatever. So it's like how companies can build a culture of trust, where people can feel safe, where they can feel included, the belonging, the recognition is super important. And also how companies, because for example, we have companies that all employees can have this flexibility, or they can work from home or in the office. For example, at Essilor, I have two realities. I have people that work in the lab. They can't work from home because their work, they need to produce. It's a hands job. So how can we give that flexibility to our employees where they can feel also valuable, and also how can we train our leaderships and our managers to have that confidence and that trust and give that flexibility to the employees. It's a big change of mentality. So it's like Ben was saying that we were forced to do the change. It was not something that we created the habits, and it's something that people wanted. It's like companies did change because they were forced. When everything happened, I was at Microsoft, so it was super easy for us employees to pick our PCs and go home. But we can't forget that a lot of companies, they didn't even have PCs, you know, portable PCs that they could pick them and go home. So a lot of things, you know, the companies had to adapt and to do a lot of changes, but there's much more to do. And how we are going to keep our workforce, and the workforce, as was mentioned, is not only our employees, it's the employees, it's the contractors, it's the every type of employees or people that work with us, and what the kind of experience we want to give to to our people. Because people during the pandemic, they thought about their lives, about what means for them to work in that company. People want to be really valuable. They don't want to work in companies where they don't feel respected. That it was mentioned here that leadership, the command and control, it's finished, and there's a lot of companies that they didn't realize that yet, and a lot of leaders they will see it because people will not want to work for those kinds of companies. I just want to add just one more thing that was already mentioned here, that so there is no one size to fits all, and Andrea mentioned the empathy. That is super important, because if I don't have things that fits all employees, I really need to understand and have meaningful conversations with my employees to understand what are their specific needs. And with that comes care. I really care about my people. And this is not, fancy buzzwords, because everybody today talks about empathy and caring and flexibility. This needs to be authentic, and leaders need to give the example. Otherwise, people will see it. It's if they feel it, they will see it. It's fake. So it's like leaders really need also to change a lot. And it's like was already mentioned here. I'm looking forward for the next period, but with that also comes a lot of work and challenges. And in HR particularly, it's going to be interesting times.
Thank you very much, Clara. Great insights. Let me just remind all the audience that you can put some of your comments, questions in the chat. So please we'll do that if you want. I try to go and make some cherry picking of that comments and to our speakers. In the meantime, let me just try to focus on some of the things that you've said and try to cross with some of my personal beliefs also. And I'll start with Ben. Ben, of course, you are an expert in these areas, and one of the things we talk about it, I think it was in our first meeting some years ago, but of course, time is changing, and I guess technology also is changing. How do you predict, how can you see in the near future? I see the near future, not futurology or things that long term, and how can we use AI and machine learning to enable some, I would not say all, but some of the talent management processes? Is it near future? How can we do that in your point of view?
Interesting question. AI and machine learning. Spend a lot of time and a lot of money in there. I think I agree with Clara. Data is the way to go. But as she was explaining it, I had a brain flash. You mentioned something, Clara, about that we know how many leaders spend how much time with which people and not which people. And then I was thinking, like, I am an absolute believer in data. I believe the information is in data. I'm not against this, an annoying little fly here. But on the other hand, how would we like it if our children would come back to us and says that the data says that you're spending more time with my sister than with me, and I don't like this. In our transparency, I think we're also going to get this data thing that people like Google gets the question, I want to be forgotten, or I don't want to be measured. So sidestep to that. But I think, yes, we will see more machine learning, we will see more data, but we will also see more, and I hope we will see more control. I'm still concerned about the bias in the whole AI thing. I mean, everybody says the same thing. The basic algorithms for AI are still biased because they are written by white Caucasians between 35 and 45. And it's all true, and it needs to be changed. And it's still a fact that facial recognition is not acknowledged by certain cities. And I think it's a good thing, but we can't go around the fact that if you use machine learning to really analyze why a certain way of working by some people delivers a specific result, and a certain way of working by other people doesn't deliver that result, you cannot step aside to it that an organization that is organized for profit is going to look at the fact, how can I then optimize that and still respecting the way it works. So I think we will get new tech. In the talent shortage, the biggest demand, I think it was 3 million. There is a need for 3 million data scientists in Europe over the next 3 years. And we don't have them. There are appalling data. So we will see more machine learning, we will see more AI, but I don't expect these big bang, huge solution. It will be little slices of little improvements of information that we will get on a basic level. That's what you will get.
Okay, Ben, I agree with you. And yes, we have to fight those biases, because with those biases, we don't have diversity, we don't have different backgrounds, different profiles, and we don't get the team effectiveness that we need. Of course, team effectiveness depends on diversity.
If I may add one thing,
studies.
Carlos, one thing, I think HR managers need to be very critical of organizations, very critical of tech providers. I see a lot of tech coming out, and then the data the tech was built on is not relevant to the country that you're doing an analysis. I mean, it's critical that HR becomes knowledgeable in tools and can either be advised or question these tech providers that they are providing the right things. Because I believe in the tools, but we need to be critical.
Sure. Andrea, I think you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to share, building up on the conversation of the data, right? Because one of the things we really changed this year was our performance management, the way we look at talent. And this all started with Gallup, Ben, probably you are familiarized with Gallup. So Gallup pick up in the retail industry. So they pick up several stores, and they analyze why would a store that is not in the best location have higher revenue compared with other that would have, the variables. And then they look into what does it make this team that works in this store much better than the others, and then they measure it.
Yes.
And what they measured is that the team did share the values. They did share, so people, when they come to work, they were really coming energized, and they understood they were working on their strengths. And this framework is all built upon measuring. And you were mentioning, Ben, that it is true that if your daughter comes and say, well, Dad, you are probably connecting more often with my brother than with me, that's a challenge. But coming from Gallup, it popped up that leaders that connect more often with their team, they will build that proximity. And we all know all of this today because we look into the data. And what we know now is that coming from the data, it doesn't predict us to be successful, but helps understand what we need to do in order to get a team that is engaged. And all it came from that study, a study that, connect behavior, but measure it. And there isn't a formula, but at least we are looking into it. So I think data in the future will be really, really relevant for us to look into the things in a different way.
Yeah,
For sure.
Just want
Yes,
to add that it's no longer perceptions. It's not longer what I think, or it's data, and the companies, they have that data. I also want to add that this means investment, and the companies, they are in different stages. For example, in Portugal, here we are talking about big companies, but we have small companies as well. And maybe some of the big companies, they had terrible years, 2 years they didn't sell. So there's a lot of priorities here where they will invest. So it's in the tech, in the facilities, in the processes. So it's not a, it's a tricky balance to achieve.
Okay, thank you, Quora. And I'm going to ask now a question to you and continue with the topic of teams and collaboration. In a recent interview, yes, I did my homework besides liking to improvise. In a recent interview I read from Quora, you mentioned the concept of collaborative talent communities. I hope I'm quoting accurately. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, and I'll explain in more detail how do you see this concept working, because I found it very interesting.
Well, to be honest, I don't recall where I said that.
It was yesterday to you.
Yeah, I don't recall it. Yeah, but
HR Portugal in
HR Portugal. So the talent communities, so at Microsoft, we were working with teams, and teams evolved a lot during the pandemic period. And these talent communities, it's where we gather people together with a common goal, and we work all together, sharing, insights. For example, I remember that I'm a certified coach, and we have a certified group of coaches, and we were giving our knowledge for the company, or people that were interested in data and AI, or people that were more in photography. It doesn't matter, or diversity and inclusion. So it's how the company can put or gather people with a common interest, and work at the same time, the skills that are inside, but also how we create this sense of belonging, community, to feel proud about the company where we work, and how can each of us can bring our authentic self to the company. So, okay, I'm very good at this, and I will share it. And I think it was Andrea today, I saw a post that she did today on LinkedIn, and she was saying that sharing is caring, and it's that, yeah.
Thank you, Quora. Perfectly clear to me. I would just now to pick one of the issues that Ben raised about legislation and of course regulation, and I could to hand over to Carlos Carvalho. I think is a privileged point of view on that because of his position and his company. How do you see, Carlos, governments interfering on this? Of new realities in talent management, new realities in terms of the people preferences, the work-life integration that Andrea started mentioning in earlier in this conference. How is going to legislation and regulation follow on this? Will be an enabler, or are we going to block it somehow?
I would say, but first of all, Carlos, like a good American would say, it's a very good question. And I would say why? Because I think that some of the governments, or starting by the European community that is more close to us, I think some of them in terms of the work regulation are looking like a rabbit that looks to a car that comes with a plane headlights coming into it, because all these working remotely, all of these changes that happen so quickly would impact enormously the way we will be working in the future. Some of the examples. Working remotely could be a good thing, and I would say, as Portuguese, that would be the best place to work remotely will be in Portugal. So all the Swiss people will have Swiss salaries coming to Portugal because they would work remotely. No, it's not going to work like that. But if we don't adapt immediately the way we fiscally are going to impact the way of people are going to work in this new world, we are going to have, once again, some fractures, because we cannot allow to some of them to work wherever they want, and others saying, no, you need to stay in the country. Same thing of the health insurance. It will be impacting health insurance for sure, because people will see that having accidents at work, and then we'll see that he was in Algarve when it should be in Geneva. So it's going to be, I think there are lots of work at this moment, and by the way, like you're saying, Carlos, fiscally we are being utilized as a, I would say, sandbag for some experiences already, and I must say that there are lots of NDA signs because there's lots of discussions going on because of fiscality over the countries. Yes, it's true, because it's going to change the way people get salaries, and of course we are starting to talk about once a month. It's the correct timing, or we should adapt to a more other way of being paid, because if fiscally we are all in the culture that needs to be once a month, because otherwise it will be a huge transformation. It's true also that via the new applications and the way we regulate the use of money and the way the banks are evolving, because they are evolving a lot, it's some of the banks are giving us the idea that all the time the money is there. So that means that it's an administrative thing, the end of the month. It's not anymore waiting for the payday, I would say. So this is the second thing. So yes, Carlos, there's lots of things that are going on. Governments think about the fiscality and the way it's going to evolve. And the transformation is there once again. And I think that I would say, maybe after some of big elections, there are things that are going to be happening, not before the election, but after the elections, because things are going to change for sure.
Because I'll bet you, let's see, if you will change in the short term or in the long term. I think that's a big question that you can put here. I have a question. It's from Pedro Felipe. He sent it directly to me, so you can see it, but I can read it briefly. How we are going to coexist in the short term with this HR model focus on the digitalization of processes and data analysis, something that Ben mentioned, for instance, with the RGPD and the waiver legislation? I think it's a good question. So I don't know if Ben, if you want to address that, or some of the members of the panel. How can, of course, that exposure and transparency that you mentioned and we're trying to deploy in our organizations can fit with RGPD, that of course is not only Portuguese, European standards? Will be an headache, I guess.
Yeah, that's why I'm sighing. It is a headache. Let's not forget that it's now with us for a couple of years. And when it started, everybody said in the beginning, we're not going to be restrictive. Governments are going to be lenient in the beginning. The beginning is gone. That's one thing. As Carlos said, after the elections, we just had our budget in Belgium. So my government is already making moves like we take a little bit of money there and we take a little bit of money there because we need the money to compensate for all the expenses we had to do for COVID. So we're going to see that. So I expect governments will be a bit tighter on the legislation. That is my expectation anyway. If I get a question that is increased during the pandemic, then it's about that. It's about privacy, security. On the top of the agenda, to me, it's moved from like position 6, 7 to position in the top 3. And I can only see this increasing in the next 6 months. So having a US startup, not a base in Europe with having not European security is going to be a pain in the back. That's for one thing I see there. So to me, an increase, definitely.
Okay, yes, I can agree with that. Carlos, want to elaborate on that?
I would say that that security and compliance is part of our discussions and more than ever. And I would say that yes, data security and the way the sensibility of some data that can be meaningful for some decisions, it's going to be key with some regulators. And yes, we are working with them also. Only the way that we can now pass from a less declarative form of do some statistics to really do some mathematics behind it. And I would say it's like career path, statistics around average of salaries in some of the corporate sectors, things like being able to discuss geographically how to put a new company, because the availability of talent and the way we are going to pay that talent, this data is already available, and that politicians would like to contradict all of this because they have other priorities in terms of localization of some of the areas, if they are of their colors or not of their colors. I would say that another big topic that there's lots of discussion here, but once again, I think, and it was already mentioned, that the way we handle data and the way that we handle these security issues is going to be part of our, I would say, another cliche, new normal. And I hate this kind of cliches, but it's the best way of saying this, because if I'm shocked of some transparency of some data, this data or this way of handling this for new generations is part of the business as usual. So they will ask for that at the beginning. I would never think 10 years before of asking about my data privacy on my contract. I never heard about that, and I didn't care. Now it's part of their, if people say, do you know that your company do with your data whatever they want, people would be scared. So yes, transparency, data compliance, and investments on security on data they are going to be huge. We are being assessed and asked to work on that and audit and certified to be audit in all of these kind of fields, and it's going to be part of the, once again, cliche coming, new normal, I would say.
I agree with Carlos, I agree. Well, it's 17:35, we're approaching the end, so I'm going to ask you, each of one of you, final takeaways about this subject. What will be your final and unique selling proposition in terms of dealing with all this complexity that we have here? I'll start with the same order. Andrea, some final message about all this?
I think after we just manage and we had opportunity to lead through these last 2 years, change is constant, so we just need to embrace the challenge we're gonna face, and we are all wondering the same. But I think one insightful thought is that people will definitely be at the center, and we are much more, I think, connected and empathic than we were before. So I think the future needs to be brighter.
That's a very optimistic final message, and I thank you for that. That's great to hear. Ben, from your side, insights?
I can only agree. I think this is a great time to live in. I mean, as an entrepreneur, there is so many opportunities. I mean, every challenge is an opportunity. I just love the moment. I think I agree with Andrea. I think if we are optimistic, we can get there. I think if we bring everything together, we can. And for me, a solution is if we bring high tech and high touch. And for me, touch is humanized and the other side tech. Then we get there. We just need to remember the tech needs to facilitate the touch. It's not the other way around. The technology needs to bring us more time for people. If we keep that in mind, because that's the message the people are giving, if we embrace that message, we will do fine. I mean, the human race has always coped with challenges. I think it was Carlos who said it, we're at our best when we're facing the greatest challenges. So we need to rise to the occasion. The opportunity is here.
Okay, I agree with that. Carlos, from your side?
I would say that I will rephrase what I said, because I think it's the best way of resuming what was my, I would say, my intervention, is that dare to take decisions now. Don't be that, the example I said, don't be that rabbit in front of the headlights. Take decisions, test, be bold, because if you wait at this moment, it's not a waiting time. Is a time to be bolder than ever and test things, because yes, we don't have the truth all the time with us, but we can test and we can make some errors, because people will understand and will follow you.
Great, Carlos. As you can imagine, for a guy that manages a brand called Darefy, I like to hear the word dare very time. So dare. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carlos, once again. Clara, your final insights?
Final thoughts, it's about people, technology as an enabler, and we are unique. So people are unique. And in a time like this, it's with the diversity that we have in our companies and the value that our people have, that we can embrace all the challenge that we will have in the future. And I completely agree with Ben. The tech, it's super important to give time to our people to use, their heads, their brains, and also their heart, that is so needed during these times.
Thank you very much, Clara. So thank you all for coming, our speakers. It was fantastic, and I love this. I'm delighted with this final positive and optimistic tone from all of you. I, of course, like to thank also our audience for this fantastic sharing moment. From my side, just one final, I would say, takeaway. I believe that transformation is here to stay. Organizations are not going to live anymore for a stable transformation stages. They're going to be all time changing, and that change has to be made, how I would say, in an holistic and structured way. You have to address leadership. It's what makes things happen. You have to address vision. You would have to address strategy. You have to address culture. As I say sometimes of some of my clients, it's no use to invest. Make an example, an employer branding strategy, if your culture is not robust enough or consistent enough to promote it. So you have to be consistent. Or it's no use to have a coaching program, executive coaching program, C-level, if you don't align in the same leadership model your line managers or your team leaders. So you have to be consistent, be integrated, be holistic to make this change. And of course, we all talk about technology, data, and we have tools that we didn't have 10 years ago or 20 years ago that provide us some of the best ways to perform it. So no excuses, change is here to stay, and we have to be change enablers, of course. Thank you very much once again. Therefore, we return swiftly and shortly with a new web talk, and hopefully also with on-site and in presence events, because we like it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have
Bye-bye.
a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.